alternative media taking on the dinosaur media, because he was covering the ethics of killing babies, that the eugenicists for a long time have wanted to promote not just abortion of the unborn, but actually killing babies up to age 3, and then after that, even older, because it's the death panels. They're saying, you don't have a life worth living. We're going to decide you're old, you're blind, you're a baby, even without health problems, we're going to kill you. And these are in prestigious journals of bioethics. We don't have Hippocratic Oath now. It's the bioethicists. They decide. But I just wanted to toot our horn. Another example of this. Here's Paul Watson's article, the first on this that I saw when this journal had just come out. Listeners alerted us. It's that chain reaction. Ethicists argue killing newborn babies should be allowed. Shocking reminder that ethicist beliefs underpin medical establishment. Paul Joseph Watson, February 28th. The day after that, right here, London Telegraph. And then after that, hundreds of mainstream publications picked it up, and a big debate happened. And we're seeing that happen more and more. Killing babies no different from abortion, experts say. They should be allowed to kill newborn babies because they're morally irrelevant up to age 3. So again, the power of the alternative media setting the agenda. Just last week, listeners started calling the guy, sending him emails saying, you know, INFOWARS, Alex Jones is attacked in the Stratfor emails. And I'm like, yeah, right. I didn't believe YouTube comments. And then the guys were sent the email. Sure enough, it's there. We write an article about it. It's in over 205 newspapers today on Google News. That, you know, the whole bin Laden in the ocean thing. And they said, you know, we've got to release the photos to disprove kooks like Alex Jones and Glenn Beck. Again, we start covering it, it gets picked up. And I remember John Rappaport talking about that more than a decade ago. As we came towards this point, as people awakened, what would the establishment do? And we're now there. So I want to talk with John today about the awakening that he predicted and, you know, what woke him up, and then tie it in to what's happening with the awakening to health freedom, but the system striking back. John, thank you so much for coming on with us.
Hey, great to be here, Alex.
There's a lot going on, but the basic awakening, what can you say about that?
Well, as you say, 10 years ago, I started seeing this, you know, flood starting, where people were beginning to ignore major media, publishing articles, doing research on subjects that I had been interested in for 10 years before that. And I was just floored. And then the, you know, the trigger effect. It appears here, it appears there, it appears here. And pretty soon, in a sense, we've got major media boxed in, because here's the story, ethics of killing babies. In fact, you know, I think I read it first on INFOWARS, now that I think of it. And then I went to the study itself, I read that, and published a piece. We've got them boxed in more and more because they don't know how to get out of where they are. You know, they really don't have any idea. I mean, they are conspirators in a sense, of course, but they're also business people who are completely trapped in their old model, and they absolutely have no idea how to get out. And I see that more and more as people are waking up and realizing, you know, I read better stories on websites than I do in the New York Times. They're more truthful, they're more in depth, they cover more subjects that I'm interested in. And then if you went to the New York Times and you said, hey, listen, I got a way to save your newspaper. I can save this thing. I know you guys are horrendously in debt. I mean, you know, you're refinancing your own debt. So in the next 10 years, you're on the way out, but I can save your newspaper. Here's what you do. I'm going to give you 3 stories that'll blow this country wide open that nobody's covering. All you have to do is cover it and pound on it day after day after day after day, like you know, the Post did with Watergate way back there. And you just keep on. People come out of the woodwork. They'll confess all kinds of crimes to you, and you'll be able to sell morning editions, evening editions. You put some of it online, some of it in print. And you're going to be selling so many newspapers that your advertising revenues are going to triple. And they would turn you down flat because they're part of the lying machine. That's where they live.
That's right. They're only a subsidiary of the big defense companies and the private banks. So if it's a loss, so what? And again, you did predict this acceleration. You wrote a lot about it. And now, what do you see the system doing? I mean, I see them coming in and trying to censor everybody now.
Yeah, I see them trying to do that. I don't think they're going to be successful at all. I think the technology's gone too far. You know, you got peer-to-peer networks. You've got other ways of getting information out that are going to stymie them. They can try. I mean, they're going to try, I'm sure. You know, they want gatekeepers and servers that are going to censor information and so forth. But I think the genie's out of the bottle.
And by the way, just to toot your horn again, I just said 10 years as a vagary. It was like 15, 16 years ago that I saw your writing online, the TV shows you were doing that were leaking out. What made you go from PBS shows and CBS and The Village Voice and, I mean, just hundreds of things, Spin Magazine, LA Weekly. What made you early on start ejecting from the establishment media? I mean, I know you're an accomplished artist and, you know, have a lot of other careers as well, but I see some of it there in the background. That black and white yours, isn't it?
Yeah, it
is. Beautiful stuff.
Thank you.
What made you start? I mean, you're one of the first to really start the exodus. Why?
Because I started trying to put things together. You know, you operate the same way. You cover 16 different stories and you say, well, look, I mean, there's connections here. So I was covering medical scandals, political scandals, corruption at all levels in government and medical areas, education, what have you. And so, you know, I started talking to editors about this. You know, just conversation. I said, don't you think that people are behind this kind of thing? I mean, do you think it's all accidental that all this is happening at the same time? Don't you think there are people who want to control society? And man, they ran screaming into the night. You know, all I had to do was just even bring it up, and they ran screaming into the night. They didn't want to have anything to do with me or those questions. They said, look, we got assignments for you. You want to fulfill the assignments, that's great, but we don't want to talk about this at all. It's just out of our league. It's all speculative, whatever. And I said, well, it might be, but I want to get in there and do some research on it. And I began, of course, reading books and so on that offered answers. And I found that at every turn, when I pitched stories that had to do with the basic question, who's running the show? You know, who is it? Is it Rockefeller? Is it, you know, Bilderberger? Is it the Council on Foreign Relations?
That's what good old-fashioned muckrakers always did.
Yeah, that was my idea. Well, this is in the great tradition of muckraking. I would run into people, editors, who would say, we don't want any part of that. Forget it. We don't want to publish anything about it. We're not interested in it. It's not real news. You know, you're going crazy. If you keep on in this way, you won't get work and so on. So I just decided, okay, that's it. Forget it. I'm just going to quit, go off on my own, and continue to do my research, because that was the thing that fascinated me about the whole business to begin with, to get in there and find answers to questions that you really have. That's why I got in there.
Sure, if it's not fun and not passionate, I have to tell my crew, and a lot of them are folks I just hired out of TV and print who were just, you know, journalists or reporters or researchers, and now I have to make them go home. And I'm the same way, because it's so addicting to want to know the truth. And throughout history, we've known there's been elites, and this establishment line of saying you're crazy, when everything we've talked about, global governance, all of it, it's all happening, and they're still using the same line, you're crazy. That isn't working with the public anymore. What's your take on that?
Yeah, you're right. It's not working, you know. They say nothing's happening, nothing to look at, just move along. And we're saying, well, gee, look at what's going on in Europe here, European Union. I wrote a piece, I don't know, it seemed like a year ago now, where I actually began to describe the layers of bureaucracy involved in these countries with the European Union. I mean, if you or I were put into that maze, we would just collapse and give up. I mean, forget about, I mean, the level of control is obnoxious, to be sure, but the labyrinth of the bureaucracy itself would drive any sane person completely insane, just trying to figure out what they're doing, how many departments, how many tens of thousands of regulations they passed since they've come into power. And then you just multiply that framework around the rest of the world, and you say, yeah, this is what they're trying to do. Any idiot can see this. They're trying to create super governments over the present governments and tie them together in what is a de facto global management system. That's what they're trying to do. And it's obvious to, millions, if not billions of people, except if you go to the New York Times and you try to talk to them about it. As you say, they repeat the same old tired line. Oh, that's just ridiculous. You're crazy. You're one of these conspiracy nuts, and we don't want to have anything to do with you, and so on. And then they print the same old stories, and they go down the toilet. Nobody's reading it anymore. Nobody's interested in it anymore. They're just committing suicide.
Yeah, they're the ones that are delusional. We have open world government being announced by the international banks, off derivatives, exactly as I said 15, 16 years ago, exactly as you did, Ron Paul, the list, David Icke, the list goes on and on, G. Edward Griffin. And we're spot on because the globalists actually write white papers, as you know, but for the audience out there that may be watching the first time, admitting all this. I mean, isn't it really an open conspiracy? That's what makes it such a joke. I mean, even as they're admitting global corporate government right now, taking over Europe and other parts of the world, simultaneously, ADL, Southern Poverty Law Center, Media Matters, George Soros are churning out articles saying we're crazy to talk about it when it's in The Economist magazine and the Financial Times of London. World government's good and the solution, but then we're crazy, it doesn't exist, John. I mean, it's now reached an absurdist cuckoo level.
Yeah.
How do you see this coming down?
Yeah, it has reached that level. You know what? They're trying to say, yes, this is what we're creating, and it's good. You see, I mean, that's essentially what they're saying. It's a good thing that we're doing. So if you're going to talk about what we're doing and say it's bad, then we're going to deny that we're even doing it. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. It's completely insane. They're completely insane, but that's kind of the attitude that they take. Well, in order to make this world a wonderful place for everybody, we have to have government corporate connections and partnerships and so on. And that's exactly what we're doing. And we're going to keep on multiplying these until we save the world. By
bombing Libya, putting al-Qaeda in charge, and it's an admitted hellhole.
Yeah, exactly. See, exactly. And that's where we come in. We knock on the door and say, what did you say about saving the world with this scheme of yours? Can we get the details on how this is, you're the Messiah and you're actually saving the world? Could we talk? No, it should be obvious to anybody. That's their attitude. So they're going down with their ship. I mean, they are going down with their ship. The European Union is falling apart at the seams all over the place in so many different respects. It's just insupportable. And if they manage to keep it propped up, I mean, they're going to have to do it by inventing yet trillions more dollars that don't exist and bankrupting themselves in other ways. The whole thing is going down. It's going down. They have no answers. The money guys have no answers except to continue doing what they're doing, which, as I say, is to just keep inventing more money out of thin air. Their schemes have reached the end of the line. And so we're picking over the corpse, really. That's what we're doing.
We're in the final countdown. Let me ask you this question then, because, again, I have guests on guests that I have on who I seek out who have been accurate now that I've had 16